Hi, George, Mr. Vice President.
Hey, Nathan.
Our country's first Supreme Court gave its first rulings just 2 blocks from here, from 1791 to 1800. And it's become more polarized since then. Merrick Garland didn't get a hearing for all of 2016, and Amy Coney Barrett's being pushed through at the last minute, even though millions have already voted. So what do you think about ideas from people like Pete Buttigieg and others to put in place safeguards that will help ensure more long-term balance and stability? And what do you say to LGBTQ Americans and others who are very worried right now about erosions of their rights and our democracy as a whole?
Well, let me start the last point, work my way back. I think there's great reason to be concerned. I was on the road most of the time during these hearings, so I didn't hear many of them. I just got the recaps when I'd get in late at night. I've been going around the country, Florida, and anyway. And my reading online, what the judge said was she didn't answer very many questions at all. And I don't even think she has laid out much of a judicial philosophy in terms of the basis upon which she thinks are there unenumerated rights in the Constitution and the rest. So, number one. So I think there's great reason to be concerned for the LGBT community, something I fought very hard for a long time to make sure there's equality across the board. Number two, I think that also healthcare overall is very much in jeopardy as a consequence of the president's going to go directly after this election directly to the Supreme Court within a month to try to get Obamacare wiped out after 10 million people have already lost their insurance from their employer, and wants to take 20 million people out of the system as well, plus 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. So there's a lot at stake. I don't think it's appropriate. I think the Constitution implies, there's no provision in the Constitution. My problem is I made a mistake of teaching constitutional law for 21 years and the separation of powers. The Constitution implies that the way the people have a right to determine who's going to be on the court is how they vote for their senators and their presidents. We seek the advice and consent of the Senate and
the president's president for all 4 years, isn't he?
No, he is. But once an election begins, by implication, it is inconsistent with the constitutional principles, in my view. You get disagreement among scholars on this. But I believe it's inconsistent when millions of people already voted to put someone on the court. I think it should have been held until this election is over, see what the makeup of the Senate is going to be. If the president wins this election, he should be able to
But how about that question of expanding the court? Here's what you said exactly 1 year ago tonight at a Democratic debate. You said, I would not get into court packing. I would not pack the court. That's not what you're saying now. Is the nomination of Judge Barrett reason enough to rethink your position?
What is the nomination of what I wanted to do, George? You know, if I had answered the question directly, then all the focus would be on what's Biden going to do if he wins, instead of on, is it appropriate what is going on now? And it should stay, this is the thing that the president loves to do, always take our eye off the ball. What's at stake? One of the things Pete has suggested is, and there's a number of constitutional scholars have suggested as well, that there are at least 4 or 5 options that are available to determine whether or not you can change the way in which the court lifetime appointment takes place, consistent, arguably, with the Constitution. I have not been a fan of court packing because I think it just generates what will happen. Whoever wins, it just keeps moving in a way that is inconsistent with what is going to be manageable.
So you're still not a fan?
Well, I'm not a fan. I then say it depends on how this turns out. Not how he wins, but how it's handled. How it's handled. But there's a number of things that are going to be coming up, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about other alternatives as well.
What does that mean, how it's handled? How will that determine whether you're for expanding the court?
For example, if there's actually real live debate on the floor, if people are really going to be able to have a time to go through this. You know, I don't know anybody who's gone on the floor and that's been a controversial justice in terms of fundamentally altering the makeup of the court that's gone through in a day kind of thing. I mean, it depends on how much they rush this. And you think about it, George. Here you got a lot of people not being able to pay their mortgage, not being able to put food on the table, not being able to keep their business open, not being able to do anything to deal with what's going on in terms of the economy as a consequence of COVID, and they have no time to deal with that, but they have time to rush this through.
Well, right now, it looks like they're going to have a vote around Halloween. So if they vote on it before the election, you are open to expanding the court?
I'm open to considering what happens from that point on.
You know, you said so many times during the campaign, all through the course of your career, it's important to level with
It
the
is, but
American
George,
people.
if I say, no matter what answer I gave you, if I say it, that's the headline tomorrow. It won't be about what's going on now, the improper way they're proceeding.
But don't voters have a right to know where you
They
stand?
do have a right to know where they stand, and they'll have a right to know where I stand before they vote.
So you'll come out with a clear position before Election Day?
Yes, depending on how they handle this. But look, what you should do is you got to make sure you vote, and vote for a senator who, in fact, reflects your general view on constitutional interpretation. And vote for a president who is more in line with you. And if you oppose the position that I would not have appointed her, but if you oppose my position, vote for Trump. Vote for a Republican who shares that view. But that's your opportunity to get involved in lifetime appointments that have presidents come and go. Justices stay and stay and stay.
We have a question from a Republican, Andrew Lewis.